right. Well, thank you everybody for being here for the webinar. We've done, I think a lot of you, I see some repeat names. We do a lot of webinars about just food recovery in general and best practices and what's happening in the industry. And we get a lot of requests for people to talk about Food Rescue Hero and our network and how to be a part of our network and what are the benefits. So we thought we would invite some of our partners along to talk about it and kind of walk us through how they made the decision and what it has done for their recovery organizations. And so I have with us today Sheila McQuaid from 530 Food Rescue and Lori Martin from Havens Harvest in Connecticut. I am going to go ahead and just do a little introduction here before I turn it over to them. Just a little history of Food Rescue Hero. So Food Rescue Hero was actually born out of a working food rescue organization. 412 Food Rescue was founded in 2015 by Leah Lizarando and Giselle Fetterman, and I joined them the same year as Director of Operations. In 2017, we realized that we needed a better solution than Facebook and text message for getting volunteers, and so we launched our first technology, our first Food Rescue Hero app. And we worked on really improving that first iteration of our app, and we're talking to a lot of other food rescue organizations, and we had some folks that were really interested in using the technology. So in 2018, we piloted bringing Philly Food Rescue on as our first external pilot partner. Since then, we've grown and we now have 15 partners across the United States and Canada, and we've rescued 137 million pounds of food as of this February through that network of 15 partners. Having 15 partners has really allowed us to crowdsource a lot of best practices for food rescue, as well as to improve our app and continue to iterate on the Food Rescue Hero offering, because we have so many partners really contributing to that goal. So with that, I am going to turn it over and introduce Lori Martin from Havens Harvest. If I can figure out how to advance my slide. There we go. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Here's the map that shows where 530 and Havens Harvest are. 530 is in California, Havens Harvest is in Connecticut. So we've got two opposite ends of the spectrum, and they also came to us with very different histories. And so we are going to start with Lori. Oh, we're not. Oh, oh Lord.
Start with Sheila.
We're going to start with Sheila. Sheila.
Okay.
Take it away.
Awesome. Okay. I am so happy to be here and seeing our it's really hard for me not to focus on Lori because I love our network so much and we don't get to see each other all that often. Anyway, I'm Sheila McQuaid. I represent 530 Food Rescue in rural Northern California. Our project is kind of a baby food rescue. So we have, every food rescue has their own story. Our story is that two area nonprofits. I'm housed at the Center for Healthy Communities at Chico State, working on local food system projects for the last decade. And our food rescue project came about from a partnership with Community Action Agency of Butte County, who runs our local North State food bank. And so a few years ago, we were at an anti-hunger conference, and I was meeting with Tim Hawkins from Community Action Agency, and he was interested in starting a food rescue project for a few reasons. Our region historically has a high rate of food insecurity and quite a bit of low-income population. We also, as highlighted by this slide, have experienced several just catastrophic fires, including the Camp Fire of 2018, where an entire town above Chico called Paradise, California burned. And in the aftermath of that fire, it was pretty clear that the food system needed a way to communicate better with food agencies, trying to work with nonprofits and pantries who were feeding people. There was just, the fire gave us that experience of having food routed to pantries. Some places in the area had too much food, other locations had no food. There wasn't an existing communication system. So that was a huge motivator for us, as well as the need for food. And we also in California were anticipating a new law that was coming into effect called SB 1383 that a lot of you have heard about at this point, but we knew it was coming into effect in a couple of years, and it would require food businesses to show proof of donating surplus food, edible food. And we knew that this law would make a huge impact on hunger if we had the infrastructure to support businesses getting that extra food to nonprofits. The goal in California loosely was to increase the amount of edible food recovery by 20% over what was currently happening in the region. And so for all those reasons, we thought it would be a really great idea to launch a food rescue project in our region. And so we started researching projects that it looked like what we wanted to do out there. We started with a little bit of seed funding and researched projects out there. So we did a bunch of research. We had a bunch of college students research, and we when we started the project, really low budget, we started with a free app that we worked with behind the scenes for a couple months and quickly discovered that it just wasn't going to be adequate for our needs launching a brand new project. We felt like the technology had to be good for this project to work well. We didn't want to go out there and try to introduce a new food system project without technology that worked. So we really liked the idea of working with Food Rescue Hero right out of the gate. I think what struck me as someone who's run food system projects for years is to have a product that was developed by a food rescue organization for food rescue. And that was a huge selling point for us. We went ahead and fundraised for the branded white label app. We've never looked back on that decision. It's been really great. And from the get-go, we leaned really heavily on Jake and Jen for their expertise. I mean, the idea of having the technology was great, but to have a team behind the technology that could help you maybe skip over some of the mistakes that we would have made, or a lot of the mistakes we would have made, was supremely helpful for our project. I mean, just really basic questions to get solid answers for has been just invaluable. Because again, we came together on a very slim budget. We kept the project going for 2 years. We are now have built capacity within our first year of using the app that we're gaining a lot of momentum right now. And I would say that, that process went, I can't even imagine not having Jen and Jake's advice as far as like scaling this project. Jake said so many times to me, like, wow, you guys are really asking good questions now. You're really doing the work now, because we really started from ground zero with this app. All right, I'm off. What else am I going to talk about here? Let's see. Yeah, so the app has been absolutely fantastic. The network behind the app has also been invaluable for us to look to our food rescue partners and see what they're doing and steal their ideas, and also see that trajectory of where our organization can look to for the next year. And these slides are amazing. They're great. So yeah, some of the advice that we've gotten, how to talk to donors, what language to use, the need for developing non-traditional partnerships, like low-income housing organizations, as we're scaling this project and we are recovering that extra 20% that our county needs to meet for edible food recovery. Where is that food going to go? Those kinds of basic questions. How to motivate volunteers, what language to use with volunteers. Some really basic stuff that we ran into. We inherited some existing food rescues when we started this project from some of our partners that were scheduled all at really weird, crazy times. And so just that really practical knowledge of being able to go to an experienced team and say, how do I handle this situation? My staff's going out at 9:30 at night when Panera closes and they're picking up the bread donation and then going to, at 10 p.m. to a homeless shelter. That doesn't seem right. Just that advice of like, oh, you need to just reschedule that was just invaluable. Questions we were struggling that experienced food rescues could just in their sleep answer our questions because they'd been there, they'd done it, they'd made those calls. It's just really been super great for us. The other piece I would say that Food Rescue offered us, like right when we joined the project, I think Jen launched Food Rescue University. And so for us as a training tool, it's been amazing to have Food Rescue University. And now we are hiring dispatchers and we have California Climate Action Corps fellows joining our team to do dispatch. What an amazing resource Food Rescue University has been for us. And also as we understand food rescue more and we're learning things about our own project that we didn't know a year ago, honestly, we've been going back to Food Rescue University and retaking some of the modules that were kind of over our head a year ago. So that resource has been amazing. And then I would say the ability to come together with our national network partners last year at the first Food Rescue Conference was amazing and so revitalizing because this work is, it's difficult to get a new food system project up and running in a community, and to speak to the partners that are doing the same thing that we're trying to do was very inspiring.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheila. And it turns out I did actually skip Lori's slides. So Karen and I are chatting in the chat and deciding that I will never be allowed to drive a webinar again, and she will take that over. So we're going to go switch over to Lori from Havens Harvest.
Sure. Our history is a bit longer. Although we launched Havens Harvest in 2018, I'll say, let me go back. I actually have been doing this work since 2015, and it started this project with my son, and actually the two of us were the primary folks, but then another son and daughter helped from the beginning. So in 2015, we were working with another app. And between the app and that organization, our values just weren't aligned. And I remember I met Jen and Leah and the whole team down at I'm not sure what the conference was, about food insecurity, perhaps, down in Washington, D.C. And I was just so enamored with their team and their values. And what struck me then, what I was hitting up against with the organization I was working with, was that there was a lot of gatekeeping on the side of who should get the food. And most of my partners were non-traditional partners. Even still, they're not the food pantries and soup kitchens. There are some, and some of those pantries, like the donations work, but we found out pretty quickly in 2015, within the first few months, like we had all this amazing food that we were getting, and we needed to have the partners to bring the food to. So, and I was getting pushback because that other organization has in mind, which I consider gatekeeping, that needs to be a 501c3, and some of these are housing sites or other loosely formed nonprofit groups, but not necessarily, with IRS designation. So that was really important for me to notice. And when I heard Leah talking about that, I was like, those are my people. And I saw the whole team with lots of energy, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. So we sort of struggled along a bit after I met them, but then it finally got to a point, it's like I needed to either start another organization that reflected my values so that we could serve the community better. And which is what happened. And we launched Haven's Harvest in 2019 after we founded in 2018. And then during the pandemic, it really became critical. Without real-time posting of runs, we were maxed out, actually. You know, our volunteers, we had a whole team of people that we could call last minute, but, you know, with a wave of food donations, which came like this, you know, we had people running around towns, even moving food, but it always was requiring calls and texts on our part. And so during the pandemic, which I can't believe now we decided to do, we had heard about the app from somebody else who had used the app out in California. And they said, hey, did you know Food Rescue Hero now has an app for other folks to use, which I didn't know. I had followed 412 Food Rescues, you know, moving along with that way. And I sent a note to Leah, and then we got started, I don't know, within a few months after that. And you know, again, have not looked back. I mean, the real-time posting alone is so amazing. And that last year, I think is that next app, we had about half of the food that we recovered, or a third of the food recovered in the app when we first switched over, and the other half, or the rest of it, was in spreadsheets and notes. I had a whole compilation of things inches high that we had to put together to, you know our final numbers. But the biggest piece certainly is understanding that this is a movement, and looking at perishable and perishable prepared foods, you know, what we focus on is a new dynamic and a new way of thinking about what we do with food in this country. So we always came at it from an environmental standpoint, and we are an environmental organization. And so, you know, the first thing is when we get the food is like, who is the nearest mouth to feed? And within that, we certainly have a lens of racism is a system that keeps, you know, control in certain people's hands and out of others. So we certainly use that. In our city, it's like, who are the nearest brown and black mouths? You know, how do we serve those communities first? And this is not necessarily going to touch the food insecurity piece. I think that we do that with other strong social programs, but it can certainly touch the hunger piece on a daily basis. So we use those lenses to sort of quickly sift through when you know the runs or the donation comes in, where it goes. And so to be, like Sheila mentioned, to be together with all these organizations looking at it in the same way last fall in Pittsburgh, it was amazing. It was amazing that we didn't have to sift through the value sheets. You know, like we are already there at that piece, so then we can discuss sort of the nitty gritty, like what Sheila said, what's the best practice and how do we handle that? And we have stayed in touch with the other organizations, national organizations, looking at either food recovery or whatever, and they're doing it in another sort of political way, which I appreciate and, you know, stay in touch with. But to get together with food rescue organizations was so powerful. And I think it's really helped our organization bring that knowledge back about the need for infrastructure in a way, because we're doing it on a daily basis. And it has helped us tell that story here. We're working on some local legislation in our city, in New Haven. We're working on some statewide legislation. And so I know from everyone else's work and, you know, sharing that around the country. So that really does, you know, it lifts our, or maybe I guess it shortens our lift and the, what is that thing called? The learning curve there, so that then we can get there faster. I couldn't think of that word. That's where I am, that colander for the nouns. And that is huge, you know, to be doing this work with the folks who are trying to figure it out in the beginning. And so I have recognized that this is akin to what we did with recycling, at least around here 40 years ago. I was part of an organization halting of an incinerator plant they wanted to build here in the city, and we didn't have municipal recycling. And at that point, a small nonprofit started to recover the, you know, recyclables, cardboard and glass. And that was 40 years ago. And we also, you know, we had to pay for that, which I contributed to, and we would get monthly pickups. And now recycling is a municipal job, but it took us decades to figure that out. And so it feels the same way, you know, in the beginning, it's like the lowest hanging fruit, people who really buy in quickly. And now we're sort of moving to the middle kinds of fruit. People see like, oh, that food's not bad at all. You know, it's not compost, which 7.5 years ago when I started, people were like, oh, what are you going to bring me? But people now, I was like, oh, when we called a couple weeks ago, we called all the public schools because we had pallets and pallets of extra bread that had been donated. People were on the other end. There was no convincing. People knew exactly who we were and they were excited to get the call. People are looking forward to the food. I'm like, yes, like we've hit our stride. So I do think that, I mean, having the app has made a huge difference for that. And yes, I'll see that. Right. So in 2021, yeah, we only had about a third in the app and the rest was in our.
That's incredible. I'm just looking at that number and that's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. So it is true. I mean, the app, when the other piece that I think is so important, and I think you mentioned that too, Sheila, it was so wonderful to meet software engineers when we were in Pittsburgh. And I felt so moved. Of course, we see their names and emails. We send them notes like, this is not working, help. But the piece that was amazing is, I mean, I could see in talking, I remember Juan's face, like his eyes looking up, like I could see him tracking and noticing, like, the brain gears are moving. And of course I felt, I also heard their passion for the work. What I think is most moving is that there's so much room in this movement for all of us. So that the people who like do the nerd side and the computer side, like it's right there and there's room for that. Not only room, but there's a need for that. And there are people who are, Laurice is our director of operations, and we've had Inez, who has been our intern for 2 semesters. And they're like right there, snappy out of it, jumps out of the car, talk to people, and there's room for that. And there's folks like me, like, oh, do I have to talk to people? Who I'm more of an introvert, although I love being with people. And I just feel like there's room for all of that. Mm-hmm. People who can show up all the time, regular folks. We have run volunteers who volunteer 5 and 6 days a week. And then the folks who can do it once a month, like that there's still room for all of that. There's room for children and there's, runs for elders. And I just like, that feels so powerful to me. And I think it's powerful in the way that we call forth. And it's why people are so moved to make a difference and that there's room for that. And what I'm struck by lately is that, some organizations, although they're struggling to find volunteers for their organization, and sometimes when they complain aloud about that, that's not been my experience. My experience is that people step up, right, over and over again from all over the place. And it is hugely gratifying and fills my well to see that can happen. And I feel like in the same way that the folks behind, lifting us up, the folks like Jake, lifting us up from Pittsburgh, like, or wherever you are now, Jake, that also it's an amazing piece to be part of that. And I look forward to, like, in 10 years, what will our story be together? And, how will the country be changed? And how will we address the waste issue and get the good food diverted and keep it in our food system? So I think that was, I felt so moved with the whole core of folks. And I do think that we have room for all kinds of people in the movement, which, perhaps that's how movements happen.
Yeah. I think that is one of the most exciting things about food recovery is there is room for everyone. There's a place for everyone. We've tried really hard with the tech to make it work for every style of volunteer. If you like to schedule your volunteers or schedule your routes 3 weeks out, like you can do that. If you just want to pick one up on the fly 5 minutes before it starts, you can do that. And it's really making room, as you said, for everyone in the movement, because without all of us, it doesn't work. So I see we have some questions in the chat. I'm sorry, Lori, did you?
There were actually, oh, sorry, Lori, if you had more to present, I would.
No, I'm all good.
We actually had 2 questions, which I can remember off the top of my head that aren't there. So I just want to get those out while it looks like maybe Wade reposted his. But the first one was an anonymous attendee was asking, and Sheila, Lori, kind of to your point about the engineers, how many people are working on the app in the back end? Jen, is that something that you're able to answer?
It should be. I'm going to throw a number out there and you can plus or minus one it. I think it's about 6 right now.
Yeah, I think 6 or 7 people.
Yeah.
And looking, to that number fluctuates by 1 or 2 people every, whenever it is, always looking to bring on more people as well. So, okay, that was one that I just remembered off the top of my head. The I'll work my way up from the bottom. Hi, Sheila. This is Wade from Community Action House in Holland, Michigan. And our team is in the process of getting ready to design, set up, and launch the Lakeshore Food Rescue in our area. You made a comment that you are glad that you went with the branded option for the app. What capabilities are you experiencing with that option of the app that makes you glad that you went with that decision on the app?
It's a great question. I mean, I want to say also about the tech team that, you know, as a new starting organization, I don't know how many people out there have worked on app development. I had one run with app development for an on-farm food safety project, and it's a lot of work. And to consolidate that work for a national network makes a ton of sense, because we, for instance, would not have been able to launch our own technology. That's just not even in the ball game. We did go with the white label app for a couple of reasons. One is we're one of the newer rural food rescues, and we have partnerships with existing counties in the region. And we thought that the branding would be really important for that potential expansion through Northern California. We thought it would be less confusing for our volunteers to have one project name to work from. And it has been a really good decision. We're really trying to focus on our lane, which is providing free transportation of food donations from food business partners to nonprofit partners, and also provide data reporting, which in California is just a huge benefit for businesses working with us. And, you know, we talked about non-traditional partners in the recipient end, but we also have food businesses joining now that are required to donate edible food, and they are new to the donation game. And so all the way around, I think getting the branded app has worked really well for us, but that's only my experience. My guess would be that a nonprofit could also use the Food Rescue Hero app, and the function would be pretty much the same. But again, I'm just speaking from
Havens
our
Harvest is
experience.
using the Food Rescue Hero app, the basic version. So yeah. And Wade, we can also, if Sheila and Lori are up for it, connect you to have more conversation about that after this too. I'm going to answer the second one. I'll read it and answer it, Jake. Okay. So Sylvia asked, she's interested in the different food rescue models and how they work with the tech. Their organization has a centralized food storage location and employees that drive established routes. And I'm asking specifically if the tech would be useful for an organization like ours. We do have a number of organizations that work on a similar model. Most of them are hybrid. They use volunteers and paid drivers. We actually have a fleet. We have several, we have 3 vehicles and drivers who drive those. But I think more and more of our partners have some hybrid model where they have some either vehicles they own or paid drivers, as well as using volunteers. And it works great for those organizations. And we can set up a conversation with you if you want to talk a little bit more about what your specific operations look like and whether or not the tech would provide value to you.
The next question is coming from Brandon Herman. He was asking how this would look in a state where you are not currently partnered. Would it be their own volunteers or ours through the app?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think there was a slide earlier that talked about local solutions and community-oriented solutions. When we started, we had that question, do we want to expand into other cities, or do we want to just help enable other cities, other places to do it themselves? And that really is what makes sense, because I know Pittsburgh and I know about food rescue, but I don't know your community. You know, I don't know Connecticut. I don't know California. And I think it makes sense to have people who know those communities to operate the food recovery in that area. What we do is we work with those organizations to help them understand how best to recruit volunteers to get your volunteer needs met. So along with the technology, as Sheila mentioned and Lori mentioned as well, there's a lot of support services we offer, including the Food Rescue University, one-on-one coaching, and then access to the network of best practices. So, if you're having trouble recruiting volunteers in a more rural area, Sheila's a great person to talk to because her area is more rural than some of our other partners. If you want to talk about big city, we have a partner in LA, So it's really, it's your volunteers, but there's a lot of support for that. We don't expect you to do it on your
own. Two people asked, can you discuss the cost structure for using this or the pricing model, different types of models that you offer?
Yeah.
And before I let you answer that, Jen, I'm going to post in the chat a link to first of all, our next webinar, which we can talk about later, and then a follow-up meeting if you want to set a meeting with me and I can answer some questions individually.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cost structures vary. So the basic app is it's a shared app. I am not an expert. I'm not a tech person, so it's hard for me to, I may not be describing this right, but what I would say is that it's like an apartment building. You have an apartment in an apartment building with other people. And so it's limited in the amount of rescues you can run on it and the population size that it serves, because it is a shared architecture. That there's no build fee. It is simply a monthly fee of $500. The branded app, which is for a larger area and does have some extra bells and whistles, the reporting feature is amped up in there. Home deliveries is available in the branded app. I think our matching algorithm, I'm not sure whether that's going to be only in the branded or whether that's going to be available in the basic as well. But because it is it's like building a house for somebody. So we build you that house, and that has a lot more capability to it. It's a lot more rigorous if you've got a larger service area, and some of our more complicated features are in our branded apps. That is a $40,000 build up front. And then there's no fee for the first year. And then after that, the fee is based on your service area. And, I think the service starts at $500 a month, depending on how big your area is. And so I will say, as somebody who's worked with a lot of nonprofits, that sometimes there's some sticker shock at a $40,000 cost. But it is something that foundations love to fund. I think we all know they love to buy trucks, they love to provide refrigeration, and they also like technology. So it's actually a pretty easy ask to have a foundation, to write a grant for a foundation to support the build of the technology. And we do have the statistics and the data to show things like Lori's incredible growth after implementing the app, the impact that utilizing the technology and being part of the network can provide.
And I will say, just to tag on, Jen, that, going into meetings to introduce new infrastructure to a community, it's really nice to have the technology with that veteran experience behind it for food rescue, because it is so new in California. To be able to lean on it has been a real asset in those conversations when we're recruiting new funding and new partners.
I just love you guys so much. I love our network. I love our friends. I love everybody in food rescue. It's such a great community. We met, not only did we get to spend time in person with our network last fall when we did the conference, but we got to talk to a lot of people that are doing food rescue around the world. And I just, whether you're part of the Food Rescue Hero Network or not, I just think it's so exciting to be able to get together in a room with people doing food rescue and talk about it. There's not enough conversation about how to actually do food rescue when the subject of food waste and food recovery is brought up. A lot of it is just too high level and doesn't get down to the nitty gritty of how to make it work. So it's just always exciting to get together with people doing the work.
I feel the same.
Right. Looks
Jen,
like
do you want to, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Do you want to briefly introduce the next webinar?
Yeah, and actually to somebody's question about volunteers, Brandon, you might want to sign up. Next month, we're going to talk about the ebb and flow of volunteer interest. and how to track data and use that to adequately plan for, the seasonality of volunteers. And what's interesting is it's different in different communities. We have an uptick in the summer because a lot of teachers and a lot of parents are interested in doing rescues while their kids are out of school. In our partner in Vancouver, everybody goes away for the summer, and they have a terrible time in the summer with volunteers. Or the first year they didn't. Then they were able to anticipate that. They were able to look at that trend and then plan for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that in our next webinar, which is in March.
I think March 16th.
March 16th. Yep.
A little note on Aaron. I think, I've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of people across the country, and we have a lot of people who are wonderful with volunteer management and engagement. Aaron is, I think, exemplary in this, has done a fantastic job, kind of single-handedly helped Cincinnati recruit tons of volunteers. So really wonderful perspective from Aaron next month. Yeah.
Great. So we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you or a lot of you next month. And in the meantime, if you do want to set up a meeting to talk about Food Rescue Hero, I think that our link is in the chat, and you can go ahead and as is the link to register for the next webinar, and you can grab those before we end, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Sheila.
much, Sheila and Lori, for taking the time to talk to everybody today. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Here.
Look at all the
Talked
hearts.
about
And
Food Rescue Hero all day long.
Same here.
I love this new, I haven't seen the reactions before. This is like a new feature where they float up
I know.
side. I think that's amazing.
That's so sweet.
Thank you, everyone.
Love
All
it.
right.
Bye,
Bye,
take care.
everyone.
All right. Bye. Take care.